Ever find yourself just, nodding along, maybe saying, yeah, okay, even when you've got some, I don't know, reservations?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling, that sort of quiet agreement.
Exactly. That's what we're diving into today. The word is acquiesce. Seems simple, but there's a lot packed in there.
Totally. We've got a stack of sources ready, definitions, of course, but also thesaurus stuff, tons of examples, legal context.
Even quotes in a research paper on personality. Wow.
Yeah, it gets surprisingly deep. We're going to try and unpack it, see what's really going on when we acquiesce.
Okay, mission accepted. Let's get into it. Where do we start? Definitions.
Makes sense. So Merriam-Webster says it's to accept, comply, or submit tacitly or passively.
Tacitly or passively, okay?
Quietly, then.
Right. And thesaurus.com adds that layer of agree with some reluctance. It's not a happy agreement necessarily.
That reluctance feels key. Wiktionary mentions that too, right?
Mm.
Implying maybe you weren't keen initially. Exactly. It hints at maybe some prior opposition or discontent that you're now, giving way to. It comes from the Latin quiescere, to be quiet, to rest.
Ah, quiet. It fits. So how does it compare to other ways of agreeing, like synonyms?
Good question. Thesaurus.com lists things like accede, comply, concur, give in. Some of those feel a bit stronger, maybe more active.
Yeah, give in definitely implies yielding.
But acquiesce has that extra shade of passivity. It's different from just neutral agree or consent or assent. Those don't automatically imply you're surrendering something.
And the thesaurus even notes it can sometimes suggest, what? Weakness.
It can, yeah. That the person complying might lack a certain strength or conviction in that moment. It's complex.
Okay, so it's not just saying yes. You mentioned assent and consent there. Those distinctions seem really important.
Hugely important. Consentawareness.net breaks this down really well. They frame assent as more superficial, just saying yes.
Like a kid nodding about a medical procedure they don't fully grasp.
Precisely. They can assent, say yes, but they can't give true, informed consent.
Because consent requires more.
Much more. The Nuremberg Code is a touchstone here. Consent has to be freely given, knowledgeable, informed, no pressure, full understanding. It's fundamental, ethically.
Okay, so assent is saying yes. Consent is informed, free agreement. Where does acquiescence fit?
That's the third category. Consentawareness.net describes it as assenting, saying yes, but under duress, under fear or pressure.
So you say yes, but it's not genuine agreement. It's coerced in the way.
Exactly. Which raises that critical point. Is a yes always real consent? The source stresses that if there's deception involved, that nullifies assent. It's not consent.
Wow. And that has massive legal weight, doesn't it? Especially in areas like sexual assault law.
Absolutely. The source points to Missouri law as an example. Assent isn't legal consent if it's obtained through force, duress, or deception.
It just hammers home that a verbal yes isn't the whole story. Not by a long shot.
Not at all. That need for genuine voluntary agreement is critical.
Okay, so should we look at some more concrete examples, see how this plays out?
Yeah, let's make it real. What did Merriam-Webster offer?
Quite a range. Like in a relationship, someone might acquiesce to her wish not to consummate their relationship before marriage.
Okay, respecting a boundary, maybe reluctantly.
Or a tough one, acquiescing in his Christian Scientist wife's refusal to provide medical care. Huge tension there between beliefs and, potentially life-saving action.
Then bigger picture things. Political stuff.
Yeah, like historical examples. She is acquiescing to a based rule, or villages grudgingly acquiescing to Israel's presence. Power dynamics, accepting the unavoidable, perhaps.
And personal stuff, too, like just accepting a reputation.
Right, passively acquire a reputation.
Yeah.
And acquiesce to it, just sort of letting it happen. Or the simple, they demanded it and he acquiesced.
Direct cause and effect there.
Then contractual uses threatening termination if new terms aren't acquiesced to, using it as leverage. But it can also be less pressured, like being inclined to acquiesce if asked politely.
Yeah, suggesting a general agreeableness sometimes, but then you get the opposite. Someone stating they will never acquiesce regardless of the offer. Firm resistance.
So it covers a whole spectrum of yielding, from politeness to pressure to outright refusal. What about more recent examples?
Also from Merriam-Webster, yeah. Things like someone in entertainment acquiescing to a request for a movie copy. Fairly minor.
Yeah.
But then leaders spending a lot of their time acquiescing to the needs of others. That sounds like the daily grind of leadership, right? Compromise.
Or in sports, a team that's not going to fold and acquiesce to their will. Determination.
Definitely. And politics is full of it. Risks for rulers in acquiescing in such a plan, or parties acquiescing on a bill, Congress acquiescing to a president's wishes.
Strategic retreats, maybe. Unenthusiastic agreement for the greater good or perceived good.
Could be. Then workplace negotiations. A union or player acquiescing to demands, often about power imbalances.
And internal struggles, too. Being forced to acquiesce to urges, or finally doing it after resisting.
Yeah, or even a school board acquiescing to a request, responding to pressure. It even touches on societal trends, like companies feeling they need to acquiesce to DEI demands.
And fear. That came up, too, as a motivator.
A big one. So across all these, that thread of passivity, of tacit agreement, maybe reluctance, it's nearly always there. It's rarely a joyful yes.
Which makes you wonder, are some people just more likely to do it, personality-wise?
Funny you should ask. That PubMed paper looked into exactly that something called acquiescence response style.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, just tending to agree with things, like on a survey, regardless of what the statement actually says. Agreeableness as a default, almost.
Huh. Did they find anything interesting?
Well, one thing was that how you word the question matters. People were more likely to agree with positively phrased items on a self-esteem scale.
So framing can nudge people towards agreement. Makes sense.
But the really intriguing bit was the gender difference they found. For women, this tendency to acquiesce seemed linked to how they thought others saw them.
Okay. Social perception.
Seems like it. Whereas for men, it correlated more with exhibitionistic behaviors.
Really? That's unexpected. Why would that be? Did they speculate?
The paper delves into potential reasons, connecting it to different social pressures or internal drives. But yeah, it suggests the why behind acquiescing might not be the same for everyone. It's not just one thing.
Fascinating. How our inner world, how we think others see us,
Yeah.
influencing whether we just go along. Okay, completely different angle now. The law, intellectual property.
Right. Feels like a jump, but acquiescence is a specific legal concept there. The Tremblay law firm source explained it well.
How does it work in IP law?
Legally, it means implicit consent. You give it by not objecting, by not acting, when you know someone's infringing on your rights, like using your trademark or copyright.
So silence equals consent in this context if you wait too long.
Pretty much. If you know someone's using your logo, say, and you do nothing for ages, you might actually lose your right to stop them later. Your inaction can be interpreted as acquiescence.
Why does the law see it that way? Is it about fairness to the other party?
Largely, yes. If someone builds their business or invests resources relying on your apparent lack of objection, it's seen as unfair to suddenly sue them years down the line. It creates uncertainty.
Right. The source had an example, didn't it? A company sees a similar logo, waits years, then sues.
Exactly. A court could easily say, well, you acquiesced by not acting sooner. It highlights why you need to be vigilant about your IP.
So what do courts look for to decide if it was acquiescence?
Three main things, usually. One, did the owner somehow assure the other party, or at least not object when they clearly knew? Two, was there a significant delay before they took action?
And three,
would the person being sued suffer unfair harm or prejudice because of that delay? Like if they've invested heavily based on your silence.
Got it. So if you think someone's infringing, don't wait. Act fast. Get legal advice.
That's the takeaway. Protect your rights promptly or risk losing them through acquiescence. Okay, so we've seen it in law, in psychology. What about broader perspectives? Quotes often capture nuance as well.
Yeah, AZ Quotes has some powerful ones. Samantha Power. Silence in the face of atrocity is not neutrality. Silence in the face of atrocity is acquiescence. That hits hard. Moral implications.
Definitely. Woodrow Wilson said something similar. No man can sit down and withhold his hands from the warfare against wrong and get peace from his acquiescence. Inaction isn't peace.
And Martin Luther King Jr. with that stark warning. The way of acquiescence leads to moral and spiritual suicide. Framing it as deeply damaging.
Yeah. AJ must observe that humans acquiesce too easily in evil conditions, suggesting we should rebel more.
Suzanne Mancy put it chillingly. All that the devil asks is acquiescence, implying evil thrives on our passivity.
And Fulton J. Sheen argued that not taking sides on moral issues is taking a side. It's silent acquiescence to evil.
Wow. Strong stuff. Thomas Jefferson warned that acquiescence under insult is not the way to escape war. Yielding doesn't always bring safety.
Virginia Woolf expressed a personal terror of passive acquiescence, that feeling of just drifting along.
But then François Fenelon offered a different view. Peace in this life springs from acquiescence to suffering, finding peace through acceptance.
An interesting counterpoint. And finally, Elizabeth Janeway on women's progress being hindered by their acquiescence in the idea they don't belong. Internalized limitations.
Taken together, those quotes just add so much weight, don't they? Moral, social, personal weight to this act of acquiesce.
You really do. Makes you pause.
Okay, just quickly circling back to the word itself, the origin. You mentioned Latin.
Yeah, from Middle French acquiescer, ultimately from Latin acquiescer, meaning to rest or to become quiet. That link to quietness is right there in its roots.
And you mentioned a funny Reddit thing. Someone got downvoted for asking about it.
Yeah. Just a little reminder that even talking about word origins online can be unpredictable. People are strange sometimes.
True enough. And thesaurus.com has all that extra stuff, too. Slang, emoji.
Right. It shows how even a formal word like this lives in the bigger, messier world of language. Plus, their word of the day, always good to keep learning.
Definitely. So wrapping this all up, acquiesce is clearly way more than just agree.
Oh, yeah. That undertone of reluctance, passivity, maybe even feeling pressured, it's often baked in.
And it's critically different from simple assent and miles away from informed consent, with real legal and ethical consequences.
From personal relationships to IP law to big societal questions, that distinction matters.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this. Think about a time you acquiesced. Why did you? Really? Was it true agreement or something else? What does acquiescence mean in your life, at work, and just out there in the world?
Yeah, it's a word worth thinking about, for sure. More complex than it looks.